Minnesota sports fans, we know all too well how it feels to sign up for a lifetime of purple pain. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
I'm just going to stare the entire time because I have no words for what was witnessed in Sunday's football game for the Minnesota Vikings. 40-3, you guys. This is Purple Daily's Before We Die. I'm Jesse Pierce, all aboard the Vikings bandwagon, still on board. We will discuss why, because it's not the end of the world. However, it was the end of this, unicorn of a season for your Minnesota Vikings. But we'll dive into.
Don't jump off, Jesse. Don't jump off.
I'm holding on by a finger though.
Please fasten your seatbelt.
He's Thor Nystrom, who probably predicted that the Cowboys were going to beat the Vikings, but didn't want to believe it because he's heavy into that purple Kool-Aid, that purple drink. And over here we got Ross Brendel, who finally probably felt a little bit of Minnesota pain once again.
The pain is back, and it's real.
It is. It's a little too real. We knew the Vikings were going to lose another game, you guys. That was without question. They weren't going to be able to ride this thing out. And in fact, a lot of the games yesterday looked like they were going to be favoring the Vikings. The Eagles were down when I checked in. The Giants, all of these things were trending the right way. I mean, Detroit, hello. Okay, Detroit Lions play football again. But then the Minnesota Vikings did something so atrocious. They lost 40-3 at home to the Dallas Cowboys. It was an absolute beatdown. Vikings are the first team in NFL history to be 8-2 or better through 10 games while having a negative point differential of -2 because they can't be the comeback kids forever, right? They're 2 losses by 17 and 37 points respectively, in addition to those 1 score. Guys, where do we want to climb in here? What's the narrative now that we have around this Minnesota Vikings? Because it's easy to say, see, we told you guys they weren't this amazing team. But it's also easy to say, hey, it's a loss. Brush yourselves off. You got a Thursday football game to play now.
Well, it's 3 different discussions, right? There's a discussion of the game yesterday. There's the discussion of turning the page to Thursday. And then there's the discussion of overall, what does it mean? And where does this leave the Vikings now? I'd like to just stick on the game yesterday for now. It was pathetic, it was brutal, and it was embarrassing, top to bottom. It's almost difficult to start with the first person to criticize, because who played well?
I have one.
Who?
Andrew Booth Jr.
Oh, to start with the criticism. Yes. Yeah, and going to the Thursday thing against the Patriots, the sensei Bill Belichick, I can guarantee you early and often will be targeting Andrew Booth Jr. and picking on him mercilessly. He's going to be targeted double-digit amount of times there. So the Vikings might want to consider doing something there because Booth right now just is not ready. But anyway, I digress. As far as the game yesterday, it started out obviously terribly with the strip sack, and it just got worse and worse and worse. We had talked about how valuable Christian Darrisaw was, to the Vikings, or just overall as a football player, that maybe, in terms of value, he was on par with Justin Jefferson. And then we did our little prayer circle for Christian Darrisaw to play on Sunday, and our prayers were sort of answered, and that Darrisaw, he was I was surprised on Thursday when all of a sudden he went from the concussion designation and questionable to all of a sudden he was just off the injury report, just like magic, right? And so all of a sudden you're excited. You're like, okay, now we got Darrisaw, which he's going to go up against Micah Parsons because that was the thing that you were afraid of. And maybe he can, keep Micah Parsons, this monster, out of the backfield. Christian Darrisaw was clearly not ready to play in that game. Christian Darrisaw, who had not given up a sack all season, he was tagged with 2 sacks yesterday. I'm definitely going to give him the caveat of he shouldn't have been playing, number 1. And number 2, Kirk Cousins is holding on to the ball for 8 friggin' seconds every time he took a drop back. But he shouldn't have been playing. The offensive line totally imploded, even with Darrisaw in there. But of course, you take out Darrisaw, Brandel goes in there. Brandel looked absolutely terrified. And every time, Micah Parsons then was lined up across from him and the camera showed Brandel's face, I think the joke I made on Twitter was every time it looked like Brandel was turning around to see Mike Myers in the Halloween movies, just absolutely terrified. And then Ezra Cleveland gets hurt. Ezra Cleveland was actually, I thought, the one Vikings offensive player that had a decent game up until when he got injured. He was able to return later in the game, and it looks like he'll be okay for Thursday. Darrisaw has already been ruled out for Thursday, which we can talk about in a bit because the Patriots have an even better defense than the Cowboys and have a good defensive front, etc. So that's going to be a whole thing. But just a pathetic game yesterday. Pathetic.
Hey, Jesse, let's just tee Thor up and stand back.
Yeah,
I mean,
it seems he has everything ready. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to be the negative Nancy this week. I don't think I get to sit back, be okay with it. I want to touch on, you mentioned Thor Darrisaw obviously getting injured, second concussion in as many weeks, ruled out for Thursday already. I mean, that is detrimental to the Minnesota Vikings, depending on how long he can be out, because 7 sacks on Kirk Cousins, most in his career. Darrisaw not being a part of the game, huge reason for that, as always. I mean, what do you do? How do you make up for that absence? Because as we've said, Darrisaw has really proven his value, but there's nobody that really can step up and replace him. And how much of an issue will that be for the Vikings going forward, depending on how much longer Darrisaw might be out beyond this Thursday's game?
You can't. It's devastating. It's almost nullifying. I would say you see what the offensive line was with Christian Darrisaw when he was healthy, and you've now seen what it is when he's not healthy, and then when he's not in. And the amount that the entire thing just falls off, particularly, of course, when the other team has like a really good edge player or edge play. But it was striking how quickly the Vikings offensive line devolved into those nightmare offensive lines of Vikings past. I was just getting all these flashbacks of it. Like, the Vikings fans out there are going to know what I'm talking about. All of these years we suffered through just abomination of offensive line play. And all of a sudden on Sunday, it was just like, oh no, the ghost of Christmas passed with that. And unfortunately, I was talking about this on Twitter last night, because of the cap crunch that Kwesi was in. He already had all these pieces on his cap book that he couldn't get rid of, or dead money that he couldn't get rid of, whatever. He only had a certain amount of flexibility in his very first offseason. He had to cut some corners somewhere, and a couple of the corners got cut as far as depth at important positions. It's not his fault. It's just, it had to go somewhere, right? Like, because you only had the cap room that you had. And offensive line and cornerback were two of the glaring problematic spots, where if the Vikings suffered one injury, and especially one key injury at either of those spots, it was a problem. And if they suffered multiple key injuries at those positions, it was going to threaten to take down both the offense and the defense, depending on where it happened. And that has now happened. The Vikings, a team that had great injury luck at the beginning of the season, part of the reason why they were doing so good, have all of a sudden now gotten hit with this tsunami of injuries and targeted at these specific positions. Like on Sunday, you had Darrisaw go down, then you have Ezra Cleveland go out. I mean, at a certain point, you had Blake Brandel in there, you had Schlottman in there, and then all of a sudden, Garrett Bradbury's like, yeah, I'm not as good as I was, when I'm playing next to Ezra Cleveland and Darrisaw, and he's back to what he was before. And the tent pole comes out of the circus tent at that point. And now all of a sudden, Kirk Cousins, he's either under duress immediately, or his internal clock was just, that's what it seemed like to me the entire game. Like, Cousins' internal clock was just screwed up. There was plays where he didn't get the pressure, where then he was like sort of short arming balls or hurrying it. Yeah. There was other times where like the enemy was at the gate immediately. Cousins was doing all sorts of weird stuff. The Cowboys sacked him 7 times, and they had way more pressures than that. They should have had more than 7 sacks, probably just in a vacuum. But like on one of the plays, for instance, Cousins he was definitely going to throw it, but then he decides like halfway through, like, yeah, I probably shouldn't throw it. And Micah Parsons was just about to sack him. And then Micah Parsons thought he threw it. And so he touched Cousins, but then didn't sack him. But Cousins still had the ball in his hand, because Cousins was just playing so weird. He was just glitching the entire game.
Can I just say, bad. Thor, you should be a rapper. The fact that you can speak that long without breathing is fascinating to me. I'm proud of you, though.
I think
that with the utmost respect, by the way.
I think Thor's been doing nothing but pounding every vice known to man, and it's coming out in this edition of Before We Die. I want to hop in.
Whiskey from yesterday.
I need to hop in on a few things that Thor said. not only is it the 7 sacks, it's the 63% pressure rate. That's insane. And yes, Kirk Cousins at times does himself no favors if he holds onto the ball too long. Doesn't really matter if you're being pressured 63% of the time. The depth thing, I'm glad you brought it up because I'm the one that gets hammered in the YouTube comments about bringing up health and depth. I'm glad you did it because now we're starting to see where it can rear its ugly head. And again, to your point, Thor, not only are the Vikings getting injured, they're getting injured at places they don't really have a ton of depth. And they don't really have a ton of depth across the board. But in this case, they're getting hurt in the worst possible places. I will say this about yesterday and the offensive line play yesterday and maybe what it will look like on Thursday night or going forward against the Jets and down the stretch. Because I think Darrisaw now with 2 concussions, probably going to miss more than just this upcoming game on Thursday. You're probably talking about a couple weeks. Hopefully he's back quicker, but when you're talking about the head, you got to be safe there. I think it's the perfect storm because of who they were up against and then the injuries and when they happened. So I don't want to read too much into the Cowboys making you look like a fool because the Cowboys defensive line can do that, as we've talked about. Mm-hmm. There are things the Vikings can do, hopefully, to minimize some of the pressure and to alleviate who's ever going to have to step in on the offensive line or what type of changes. But that's going to involve things like leaving a tight end back for pass protection to do a little extra chipping, maybe using an extra offensive lineman if need be, keeping the running back in the backfield. And that does change your play calls. That does change your offense a little bit. But look, I think we'd be giving the Vikings a little bit of a free pass if we just let them off easy here. This is every team in the NFL faces these situations. This is why depth is important. This is why coaching does matter. And we'll see, hopefully, all of that come back together simpatico. Hopefully the team, look, you could make an argument. This is the best time to play on Thursday night. You come back in on Monday. I don't want to say you burn everything that happened because it needs to be reviewed. You need to see what you did wrong. But I think playing on Thursday could be a great positive for this team. The final thing that I will add, it just looked from the get-go. Dallas looked faster. They looked more ready to play. And then I saw people on Twitter, people who cover the Vikings talking about, oh, even from the get-go, there wasn't much atmosphere in this place today. How's that possible? Yes. People had 3.5 extra hours to drink. It's not it's not on the fans, but that's the thing that always, how did the fans not bring it if that's actually accurate?
That is very true. One of my favorite tweets I saw yesterday was from @QBWins, and it says, me at 2:40 p.m. The Vikings could get the number 1 seed. Me at 6:30. I hope they don't make the playoffs. Like that emotional roller coaster that we all feel and how quickly everyone is to dismiss this team. Again, they're still 8-2. It's one that you have to wash away and bounce back against New England on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day. Not ideal that it's a Thanksgiving evening night. Yes, I know you all are tired of hearing about primetime Kirk and Kirk not at noon, but it is what it is. Those are real things that happen. The 3 keys for me, I think, you guys, in the loss on Sunday, I think you guys had kind of mentioned it, but I'd like to delve a little bit deeper with you all, if you would suit me. The pressure on Kirk, without question, that's not sustainable. That's something that was that's a key to beating this Minnesota Vikings team as a whole. I think more and more teams are going to notice that, right? And especially with Darrisaw out, there's that more opportunity. Pass rush, and then the defense, you guys. We were giving Ed Donatel the D back. Yesterday, the only big D in the building at US Bank Stadium, aside from the Cowboys, was Johnny Sins up on that big screen. Fortunately or unfortunately, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, please go check out those memes. Hilarious. No, I mean, I think you saw the Cowboys ran the back out of the backfield, and that shell defense just was not compatible. What did you guys make of the defense or lack thereof for the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday?
The Johnny.
Are you still thrown off by the Johnny Sins mention? Yeah, I had to do it
yesterday. I was getting sent that by in my group threads, and I got texted it a couple of times, and I kept looking. I was like, who the why? It's just they're honoring.
And then you Googled it. And you wish
person.
You didn't Google it.
Well, no. Then I had to ask one of the people that individually said it to me. I'm like, I don't understand why this is funny. And that I was like, oh, okay, I get it. The Vikings were clowning themselves even before the game started. The defense was the defense was pathetic. They joined the pathetic party with everybody else. I took the time a couple weeks ago to apologize to Ed Donatel. So right now I want to take the opportunity to apologize to our viewers for doing that. And I want to rescind the apology that I gave to Ed Donatel a couple weeks. What are you doing, Ed? What are you doing, man? Like, they have Tony Pollard, they have Ezekiel Elliott, they have a good offensive line. And every single time it was like 6 yards downfield before the first time they get touched. Then there'd be situations where the Cowboys only needed like 3 yards for a pass, where the cornerbacks were like playing 8 yards off of them. And then there'd be other times where it's like obvious deep shot time. And now the corners are playing up on them. And it's like, hey, Ed, maybe this is the time to play Andrew Booth 8 yards back and not the time when they're going to just chuck it out to the guy on a funnel screen. Like, and the no adjustments, the whole deal, it was really frustrating. The Cowboys did everything that they wanted. And every single thing that, like, the fans and the podcasters and the writers, every single little detail that we had discussed in advance of these are the concerning things of the matchup for the Vikings going in, he didn't address any of them. Like, Tony Pollard in space. Hey, Ed, maybe you want to do something about that. You know that your linebackers aren't great in coverage. You know they're kind of slow. Like, maybe you should figure something out for the thing when Tony Pollard's running out to the side and then dad just throws it to him. Like, did we talk about that in practice last week? And there's a million other things. But yeah, it was just the whole plan lacked continuity. The players stunk for sure on both offense and defense. But what they were doing schematically on defense made absolutely no sense. And by the way, schematically on offense, what they were doing made no sense either. We had talked about it last week about like how O'Connell, if either Darrisaw was out or if he was compromised, the way that you would sort of attack this Dallas defense, where they have the awesome front, they have the awesome pass rush, but their run defense isn't great, and their secondary is injury ravaged and compromised and had just gotten lit up by the Green Bay Packers, etc. Where you would want to take the pass rush or try to mitigate it as best you could by trying to gash them with the run with Delvin, trying to establish that early, slowing things down as best you could, and then helping your offensive. Jesse, you had mentioned this before, but like, of course you had to help out your offensive line, either with the, by making the passing game quick hitting, or by delineating more resources to the guys in protecting Cousins by, having CJ Ham back or Hawkinson back or whoever, extra guys for the offensive line. KOC didn't do either of those things. All of the concepts were for downfield. And not only that, Cousins was clutching the ball and didn't know when to throw it. It was holding on to the ball way too long the entire game. Just pathetic all around again.
Another thing that comes to my mind, not defensive related, and I don't even know how or where to put this on the list that's pages long of things you didn't like about the game against the Cowboys. I know you don't want to pull your quarterback too early. But you also
should have gotten yanked at halftime.
Yeah,
with
you
the
also
Thursday game coming.
Yeah, you also don't really want to pull your players too late either. And for as critical as I have been on this podcast and other podcasts of Kirk Cousins, and I'll say it here, by the way, because I don't think I've ever said it, because I'm already seeing comments about being negative on Kirk. I do believe you can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. I really do believe that. I think it's maybe harder than other quarterbacks, but it's hard with a rock star Hall of Fame quarterback. So that's the caveat, okay? I do believe you can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. With that said, you can't win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins if he's physically unable to play. There is no need to keep him in a game where he is getting his you-know-what beat, and it's almost mathematically impossible to come back at the game. And I know you don't want to get Nick Mullins killed either, but you know what? Nick Mullins is the backup, and that's kind of the reason why he's here. So yeah. I don't know if I would have yanked him at halftime, Thor, but I wouldn't have given it much. The moment the Cowboys scored again and you didn't, that's kind of the point where you call off the dogs, you look at other people, and you try and figure out how to reel this thing back in with the Thursday game.
I mean, on that point, do you think the reason that you didn't pull Kirk at halftime, do you think there's too much belief in that room that they can come back and be those comeback kids again? Because clearly they had done it time and time again. They just did it in Buffalo, right? And it's good to have that belief, but do you think that's almost what hurt them a little bit in the long run too, as they were like, it's fine, we don't play a great first half anyway, we'll come back in the third and especially in the fourth? Do you think there was maybe a little bit too much of that thought process in their minds?
I believe that to a degree, because you never want to quote unquote punt on a football game, but to a degree you need to read the room too. I think even that Bills game, it was It was closer. It got away from them in the third quarter. Then they reeled it back in the fourth quarter. That game yesterday or Sunday felt pretty unwinnable by about 3 or 4 minutes left in the first quarter, right? And then you get to halftime, and the game really isn't even all that close at that point. So I believe in what you're saying, Jesse. I just don't know. It's not an easy situation to handle. All as I can say is you have to protect your quarterback. And if you can't protect him during the game, then you got to get him the hell out of there.
That's very true.
So they're down at 20, they're down by 20 at halftime. For all intents and purposes, the game was over. But yeah, I mean, the reason he kept him in was because he don't want to go into halftime and look to his team like he's putting up the red flag.
We're defeated.
Right? Yes, correct.
He's conceding because if you shut the Cowboys out in the second half and you score 3 touchdowns, then you come back and win, I guess. But like if you watch the first half, the Vikings were not coming back, and especially when. I mean, you could have talked yourself into hope at halftime, but then the Cowboys come right out, and then Pollard gets another touchdown. It's like, oh, great. Now the lead's even bigger. For me, as the coach, you have to make tough decisions. And with the way things were going, and with now Kirk is seeing ghosts in the pocket, and we have bad Kirk, and the injury concerns on the team, people are getting nicked up and everything like that. This one was a loss. And then you have the Patriots coming on Thursday. For me, in the situation that you're in, it's not conceding. It is improving your odds to win the game on Thursday. There was absolutely no reason to keep the starters in longer. Now, that's one of my smaller qualms from yesterday, but it's a qualm nonetheless. I was saying this at halftime, right? It's just what I would have done. I actually think it would have improved their odds a little bit to win on Thursday, but that's not what they chose to do. Yeah.
I want to ask about the need to win on Thursday, but first I do want to know where TJ Hawkinson falls on your list of qualms in that game. Obviously, everybody saw that touchdown that should have been. I feel like a couple of drops. I feel like it was definitely not his best game, but I feel like always, they're very quick to turn. Vikings fans have been very quick to turn on Hawkinson. I think that's premature. Thor, Ross, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it was like I walked into the cafeteria and all of a sudden the class, they're throwing their food and they're doing all this stuff. And then my son's in the class, my son TJ, and it's like he's going to be the well-behaved one, right? And then he's right in the middle of the dang thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, when early on when that ball just clanged off his hands in the corner of the end zone on that third, it was the third down, right? Or was it the second and then the third? Because they
had to kick.
Well, it was the second down was the first drop down, right?
It happened too many times then. Yeah. Clearly, if we can't even recall which one, it's happened too many times.
So the best shot he had was on the second down then. And then the very next play, it also hit him on the hands. That was a tough one, though, because the defender he was on really fought him on the release. And then Cousins really fired a fastball that it would have been a really slick catch to catch the second one. The first one, you just can't drop. And it was tough because at that point the game was still close, and then it very quickly got out of hand. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't a good game by him. It wasn't a good game by literally anyone on the roster. It sucked.
How important is? Go ahead, finish.
I was just gonna say I'll make it simple. TJ Hawkinson was bad, but so was everybody. But at least Greg Joseph made his one field goal.
Well, Ross, you had to appreciate at least that time when the Dallas kicker, as the special teams whisper, when
my goodness,
he hits the 61-yarder or whatever, and then they're like, no, actually that didn't count. We got to look at the review. Then he hits it again. I was like, you got to be effing kidding me.
No problem.
He comes out and he does it. It was an insult to injury game, just over and over and over again, where it was just unbelievable stuff happening. That's what can happen. Like it's the possibility of when one NFL team plays their A+++ game, plus they get the breaks, and the other team plays their F-, and then just everything goes wrong in addition to that. It was just a bad confluence of things.
And I'm gonna beat you to something, Jesse. It's also a slap in the face when you could have picked up Brett Maher for your fantasy football team.
Obligatory fantasy football mention.
Instead, you figured Kaimini Fairburn might get more field goal attempts because he plays for the Texans and he's at home, and it just goes the apps. I think Maher had like 48 fantasy points yesterday for a kicker, which is, I'm obviously being facetious and nobody really cares about kickers that much, but that was just insult to injury yesterday. So I'm Happy to beat you to your own bit, Jesse
I was just gonna say because you know who had an A++ game? Jesse's fantasy football team.
Obligatory fantasy football mention.
And Kyler Murray's on my bench because I don't think he plays tonight. But do you know who does? A beautiful, beautiful specimen of a man, Jimmy Garoppolo. So go get me some points, Jimmy. Derrick Henry is actually the reason my team was carried. So
Jimmy starting for you tonight?
Yeah.
Obligatory fantasy football mention.
We needed those to cheer us up a little bit.
We do, exactly. You know what also cheers me up is Thor's hammers because I am winning that leaderboard. We will show you that leaderboard. But first, the other thing that warms my heart, some booze, some beer, some wine.
I was just going to say, Jesse, when you've watched a game that we all endured this past weekend and when you have to talk about what we're talking about right now, booze is the only way to fix it, and Lake Ridge Liquors, they can help you with their huge selection of local craft beer, including, take notes here, Surly's Before We Die. I had one of those yesterday to remind me the pain is worth it. Before we die, this team will bring us a Super Bowl championship. Lake Ridge Liquors also has over 1,000 wines in stock, and that 40-foot-long wall of whiskey, including a Lake Ridge exclusive barrel pick of Jefferson's Rye single barrel. Guess what? There's only 4 barrels that made it to Minnesota. They have one of them. You know about the great prices and the great service. They're locally owned and operated by Minnesota sports fans. You need to support them at their convenient location, just 30 seconds off of 694 on Rice Street. They even have a rewards program. Super simple. Who doesn't love free booze? Oh, love it. Just the sound of that makes me happy. Mention Score North sent you. Sign up for the rewards program. They'll spot you $5 in rewards for your next visit. Pretty simple. Lake Ridge Liquors. All right, are you ready for this? I cut you off a few times. Was there something else we needed to get to?
No.
Okay, good. Good, because I
mean, if there's more me, that's always helpful. Like, I think the people appreciate that. Just more Jesse.
I just don't want to talk about the negativity anymore. Let's try and have some fun with Thor's hammers. I think that sounds fair, doesn't it?
Let's do it.
Thor's hammers.
And Thor, I'm sorry, but we have to do this. Take a look at your updated leaderboard.
Look at that. God. In writing, right there.
Yeah.
Jesse, can you give us that celebratory woo woo? What was that?
Let's go.
Man,
we're
really
happy for you.
Honestly, nothing.
Really got to pick it up.
The only thing that's greater than me winning is Thor almost losing. He's going
I'm coming for you, buddy. I'm coming for you.
Yeah, no, Ross is almost catching up to me. The Vikings go to crap. I almost swore the Vikings are going to crap. Nothing's good. Nothing's good. At least my Hawkeyes won on Saturday. The rest of it's crap.
Let's get to Thor's hammers. I don't want to talk about the Gophers either.
Okay, let's get to Thor's hammers. So you know, this is the first episode we've done this year, but the Vikings have a Thursday game. We do not have player props out yet. We're recording on Monday afternoon. Books don't drop them for the Thursday games on Monday. So instead what we're going to do for the other non-Vikings ones, we're going to do the Thanksgiving games. So
love it.
We will start with Jesse. Buffalo minus 9.5 in the early Thanksgiving game, traveling to Detroit, the resurgent Detroit Lions.
Yes.
Jesse, who you got in that one?
So hang on very quickly. No respect for Buffalo, who last weekend at home in Ford Field takes care of a juggernaut Cleveland Browns team. They're giving basically 10 points to the Lions. They're overvaluing them. I don't know. I'm trying to sway your opinion,
Buffalo.
Jesse.
Obviously.
I'm taking Buffalo too, Thor.
It'd be fun. I think I enjoy Detroit doing whatever they're doing right now. But Buffalo all day.
Looking at that leaderboard, I was trying to trick Jessie, and she was not falling for it at all. I'm taking Buffalo as well.
You definitely tricked me because I'm taking the Lions.
This is why
I think it's tough because this to me is a game where I think the Lions, if everything goes well, they could win, but it seems more like if the Lions cover that, Thor, it'll be a backdoor cover, which doesn't really matter because it counts the same.
Yeah, but Dan Campbell, man, he's getting juiced. You know, like in the post game, did you guys see that? I love it. Yes, I love it when he does like I'm proud of you, man. You're learning how to win, man.
He's probably just jacked that he's not fired yet.
He uses the word men or man as periods in his sentences, and I love it.
I think Jesse's on to something. 3 weeks ago, the guy was dangerously close to being fired at year's end, and now he knows he probably bought himself at least another offseason.
Yeah. Right?
What else do you got, Thor?
I enjoy Dan Campbell, so I'm here for it. The middle Thanksgiving game is Dallas minus 8.5 hosting the New York Giants. Jesse, what do you think?
9.5.
8.5 is what we got.
You said 9.5, didn't you? 8.5.
Are we gonna play this game again, Jesse?
I'm gonna go. I want Giants.
You want the Giants? I'll go.
Mm-hmm.
This is really tough. I'll go with Dallas.
You're gonna go with Dallas. This is kind of a tough one. After your best performance of the season, invariably, not only are you giving away more on the spread, but you usually do not play nearly as well. The Vikings just found that out when they came back from Dallas. Or I'm sorry, from their win over the Bills, and then obviously fell on their face. I'm going to go with the Giants and hope that Dallas gets their letdown spot there. That brings us to the Vikings game at night against the Patriots. This line opened at 3. It briefly Vikings -3. It briefly dropped to Vikings -2.5, and it looks like it's back up to Vikings -3. So we're in that range. So Jesse, Vikings -3 hosting the Patriots on Thanksgiving night. Who you got?
I will take the Vikings.
Okay. No hesitancy.
No hesitancy. They're getting it done.
I really wish this was at 3.5 because then I would have taken Bill Belichick. I don't know why this also feels like a game the Vikings can easily lose, but I'll take the Vikings.
They're in the bounce back spot, but the injuries at the key spots and Belichick, the master, I would there was a game when I was an I forgot if it was 2006, 2007, but the Vikings played the Patriots on Monday Night Football, and the Patriots sort of had a vanilla offense that year, but the Vikings had terrible cornerbacks, and
Did they have Tom Brady though?
They did.
Okay, so
well, yeah, but the Patriots had crappy receivers. But I'll never forget this. We have people over to the house that we were living in an undergrad, and the Patriots came out with 5 wide receivers, even though they might have only had 7 on their or 6 on their entire roster. And it was just like the oh crap moment. Like Bill Belichick knows exactly, and they just went in the air raid the entire game and just ate the Vikings alive. So anyway, it's tough with their
let me say this before you hop in here, Thor. I still think the Vikings, even talent that's available to them, are more talented than the Patriots, but you can't account for the headspace that the Vikings are currently in. We don't know if they're going to flush it and come back on Thursday completely forgetting about it, or if the doubts are starting to creep into their own heads. And that's honestly the part that we don't know, and I think we got to play the game on Thursday to find out.
The Vikings are absolutely going to play way better, but there's just nothing they could do to overcome going from the best left tackle in football to Blake Brandel, or you've gone from Dantzler to Evans. Now you're down to Booth or maybe Duke Shelley. That's the stuff that I think Bill Belichick may be able to exploit. So I'm going to take the Patriots +3. The last one that we have for today, the over-under in this game, obviously set pretty low. The Patriots have this mediocre offense, but a very good defense. In fact, I believe the Patriots coming out of this past weekend's games are number 1 DVOA defense. So, I mean, this, we'll see if this sets up to be a low-scoring game, but certainly that's what this total would be indicative of. 41.5 is what it's currently installed at in Vegas. Jesse, over or under?
Over.
Oh,
I'm going to go under because in my head, I'm thinking Vikings 20-17. So right away, I said if it's any more than 40, I'm taking the under. So I'll go under.
I'm also going to go under.
There's a reason I'm at the leaderboard. All right. I like it. Again, that is Thor's hammers. I love me some Thor's hammers. Look at that. God, we could just talk behind this the entire time if you want.
Would you love it as much if you were in second or third?
Obviously not. Obviously not. The moment that happens,
it's her favorite segment only because she is at the top every time.
At least she's honest about it. Hey, on-air production note at some point when it lends itself, We might need to go back and do a review of Quessie's first draft here during the season because
I'd love to.
The early returns aren't so great. Some of it his fault, some of it maybe not his fault. And again, it's probably even too early to do that. I'm a huge believer that draft classes take more time. Some players can be more impactful in year one than others. But the early returns are not so great. And then, oh, by the way, you have the side development of now Christian Watson is on pace to have 35 touchdown catches this year. So that's a bit of a problem, too. But at least the Packers are nowhere near the playoffs.
If you guys want this episode, put it in the comments that you want that episode. I would love to record it. So if you guys want it.
We do know this. I got to slide this in here before we dies. We do know there will be more than likely, not officially yet, but we do know there will be more than likely at least one home playoff game in Hennepin County.
Before we die, you guys are all going to love the Hennepin chant. And
time now for the Before We Die crew to give us their Before We Dies.
Was that your Before We Die, Jesse? I'm so sorry.
Kind of, I think, and then I always forget. Before we die, Jesse will also remember that we have that button bar to utilize. No, that wouldn't be my real Before We Die. Before we die, let's have Thor go first, because I feel like I've gone first the past couple times. So finish that, Pop.
Okay, well, you're going to have a tough act to follow.
Are we sure it's Pop?
There's a subject that means a lot to me that I need to get off my chest. I go to Chipotle quite a bit for lunch and for dinner, and sometimes I eat the leftovers for breakfast. But anyhow, the whole point being, I had accumulated a lot of points on that app. You know, you order it on the app, you go in, you grab the bag, and then they go up, whatever. Well, I had moved into my house last summer or whatever, and I'd stopped using the app for a bit. You know, you move into the house, things in the light, you know, the other things, they sort of go by the wayside, whatever. Well, recently I was like, oh, you know, I should check on my points. I probably got a whole bunch of things because I had accumulated a whole ton of them. They had expired like in February. I had a metric ton of Chipotle points. I could have bought the entire U.S. Bank Stadium Chipotle lunch, and they just took them away from me. Before I die, I want restaurants to stop having expiration dates on their points on the apps. For what reason are you taking them away from us? They don't have monetary value. You are not a nation state. Why are you taking my points away, Chipotle? It's ridiculous.
That's true. I can't beat that. Yes, give the man his points. Chipotle.
Before we die, Chipotle and their parent company will make good by Thor and sponsor Before We Die, which you can do yourself, scorenorth.com, keyword partner. But I do believe that Chipotle will make it good. They will sponsor this podcast, and they will give us and some of our listeners a heaping pile of those delicious chips. I don't even need the guac. Those chips are
I need the queso.
Just delicious. Just delicious.
Too. But I love Chipotle. But give me
I get double up on the queso. I get the big one and then a small one. Sorry.
Before we die, Chipotle will win Thor's heart back. Jesse, take us home.
No, I literally can't top that. Especially this goes against my Taco Bell sponsorship that I've been trying to lock down from a hockey perspective. So I really am going to say
this is another rivalry we got, Jesse. Chipotle against Taco Bell.
God, I love me some Chipotle.
Thor, I'll close with this if you don't mind, Jesse. Thor, I don't know how to describe this. I'm happy for you and your Hawkeyes. I'm not that happy that you didn't endure the elements. You sat in the posh of sitting with the media and hobnobbing. Yeah. I sat down there, I endured the elements, and I was just fine. And believe it or not, Thor, we texted back and forth. I'm okay with the result. That was the quintessential Gopher loss and quintessential Hawkeye win happening in the same game, and it was as predictable as the sun. Rise in the east, sets in the west. That was as predictable as that.
Credit to you for sitting out there. I mean, it was said to be the second coldest game in the history of that stadium, and they said it was 1 degree at field level when they kicked off. It was so cold. They had me sitting by the window of the I definitely can't complain about it. You know, I was.
He is though.
I was the who is the guy in Gladiator where he sits up there and he puts his thumb up and down, like that's sort of what you feel like up there.
Joaquin Phoenix.
So I'm definitely not complaining about it, but like. It was even cold in there. Like I had a regular hat on. I took that off and I was wearing my winter hat and the thing. Like the whole thing was cold. for Ross to sit in that thing, or anyone else that did for like the 3.5 hours, credit to them. I wouldn't even be thawed by now.
Two words: winter classic. So
I even made a stop to a local watering hole for about an hour and a half before the game and was outside. So I was
I would have been eating a dilly bar on the sidelines, but that's just me.
Dilly bar Dan legend.
Minnesota tough right here, kids. And these 7-inch pythons when they run wild on you.
Just to top my toughness, I went overnight ice fishing up on Mille Lacs when it was like 50 below with its wind chill and everything. Just living the dream. I loved it. Anyway,
whole deal.
I also love all of you guys. Thank you for checking out Monday's edition of Purple Dailies Before We Die on Score North. Reminder, I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom, and he's Ross Brendel, bringing you Vikings takes, content, and a ton of fun each and every week. We will have our second episode of the week released on Friday because your Minnesota Vikings play on Thursday, so be on the lookout for that Friday instead of our normal Thursday release. But again, drop us your comments. Let us know what you're thinking of the show. Appreciate every single one of you giving us a shot. Starting to rub on you. I know we are. I
appreciate everybody except for the one guy who just hates me.
Eats you. It's so good though. It's actually Thor, and it's just his burner.
My burner. Yeah.
Did you say Friday, Jesse?
I did say Friday.
It's Friday. Got a pot on Friday.
I couldn't imagine why people would comment in the comments.
I'm out.
Again, you guys are great. We will see you Friday. Go Vikings.
Skol Vikings.